Alrighty, Shalom Aleichem and Baruch Habayim, Baruch Hashem. Welcome to our advanced studies here at Congregation Mashiach Yisrael. My name is Scott Siskin, and tonight we're going to be studying our beloved Tanya, chapter 42 of Likutei Amarim. Mi yiftach otana b'tefila uvracha. Who would like to open us with prayer and a blessing?
Rabbi, thank you that you have given us the opportunity to come out of the world and take a moment to learn of you, to learn more about you, to learn your way and your truth. Open our hearts and our minds and put everything else aside and let us just bask in your presence. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
All right, chapter 42, of course, a very important number in Judaism. Is it too early to start with a quiz? Let's start with a quiz. What does 42 represent in Judaism?
Anna B'Koach.
Anna B'Koach, of course. This special prayer that's supposed to do what for us exactly? One of the 42-letter name of God.
Mm-hmm.
What's it do for us?
Transcends us.
Takes us to the next level, right? Takes us to the
It's a
next
ladder.
level. The Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi, was taught primarily by his teacher, the Maggid of Mizrich, whose name was Dov Ber. And he learned his information from, of course, all the rest of our sages in the Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, but primarily from the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov was famous for his teaching at the end of the book of Numbers in Parshat Maseh, where he had said
42 journeys.
that if you look in the Bible, in the Torah, it says that the Israelites in the desert, they had 42 journeys.
Mm-hmm.
And you could count each place that they went to on the map. And these 42 journeys represent the 42 journeys that we, the souls of Israel, the children of God, have to make from cradle to grave. 42 journeys. Some of them are long. Like, for example, I believe it was in Kadesh Barnea, the Jewish people who camped there for 19 years, didn't hear one word from God. And some of them were very quick. They camped there overnight and moved on the next day. So also, chapter 42 here in Tanya is correlating and corresponding, I believe, to a certain extent to the concept of, so what is it that God wants from us already? Famous verse in Torah, famous verse in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, where it's going to help us to take us to the next level, very journey style, very step by step. Here's how it goes. So chapter 42 is kind of short and sweet. It's but very profound, extremely profound, and very relevant and extremely practical as well. So let's jump right into it. Perhaps you remember that where we're coming from here, chapters 41 through 50 in Tanya are this 9-chapter segment of a marathon about love and fear. What does it mean to a child of God to love God, to fear God, and how exactly do we accomplish that? And again, I emphasize marathon and not sprint because we're covering a lot of content here in a lot of different areas and parables and stories and teachings and verses. So take some time, look out the window, find a couple of things that look for you, connect to you when it comes to love and fear of God, and attach to those things because it's going to be part of your route through which you're able to connect to God in this next level way that the Alter Rebbe is trying to show us. Sure.
Didn't we just learn this the other day that everybody, along with your Torah portion, has a chapter in Tanya?
That's right.
Is it mine 42?
Is it?
Is it 40 or 42?
Sorry, my phone's plugged in right now.
But yes, I just learned that too. I was like, well, what is it? Mine is the love and fear. Is that this one, or was it 2 ago?
It might have been this one. I don't remember. I looked at mine right afterwards, so I got all self-focused.
Where do you get this?
Actually, he has this thing that shows
There's an app
what
for
your everything.
So the fact of the matter is, every time that there's a person who's born into this world, and it happens all the time, some Jew somewhere, some congregation somewhere is studying their daily part of the Torah, right? So, for example, today is the third aliyah of Parshat Vayikra, right? Again, we're studying the Tanya out of order here, so we can take a closer look and examine these chapters a little bit more detail. So, corresponding to that, you're going to have a portion of the Tanya. I believe today was like chapter 36 or something along that.
You don't have a chart in the Tanya here, do you?
Well, if you look at right here on the page, it says chapter 42, the 24th of Nisan.
Oh, okay.
The 19th of Nisan in a leap year.
Ah.
So, there'll be a portion of the Tanya, there'll be a Hayom Yom, there'll be some Psalms for the day. All these are your portion. A portion of the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, a portion of the 613 Mitzvah, which ones are specifically read the day that you were born. I think this is all significant to kind of give us a little direction and instruction as to what God expects from us and how we accomplish it. And if you study that stuff, you'll find some very interesting and beautiful things. But back to the subject matter at hand, chapters 41 through 50, I believe, are this marathon on love and fear, where we get a chance to really examine like a diamond every different face and every different aspect of what it means to love and fear God. And hopefully this will give us some extra keys and tools to be able to acquire this love and fear, which, as we'll see in chapter 42, has been within us all along. Let's jump right into the matter. Chapter 42 is based on a specific verse of the Torah, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12, and we're going to examine it in detail tonight. The title of this chapter of Tanya, based on our handy-dandy map of Tanya, is Fear a Small Matter? As I'm sure you'll see soon, the verse we're examining, Deuteronomy 10:12, Moshe Rabbeinu, he's teaching the children of Israel, and he says to them in his famous last words, he spoke to the children of Israel before his passing for 5 weeks. It's like every rabbi's dream and every congregant's nightmare, right? This 5-week-long sermon before he goes and passes and says, this is my last will and testament to you. This is what my hopes for you, my prayers for you, my blessings to you. I'm going to admonish you. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, some of the stuff that you don't want to hear, because this is the last chance for it. So in that big sermon, Deuteronomy, Moshe Rabbeinu, Alev Shalom, our teacher Moses of blessed memory, he says, so what is it that God wants from you already? What is it already? They've got 5 books of the Torah. What is it that God wants from you already? And what does he say? Simple. Just this. Just fear God. That's all I'm asking. If you fear God, everything else will fall into place. So, that's the title of this chapter, is Fear a Small Matter. The Talmud answers, and this is our short summary for tonight. Yes, for Moshe Rabbeinu, for our teacher Moses, fear is a small thing. And for the quality of Moshe in each Jew, in each child of Israel, and everyone connected to the olive tree, the faculty of da'at, knowledge, which brings intellectual reflection into feeling. So I'll read that one more time real quick. Is Fear a Small Matter is the title. The short summary is yes, for Moshe, and for the quality of Moshe that exists within the heart of every Jew, the faculty of da'at, the attribute of knowledge within us, which brings intellectual understanding intellectual reflection into a feeling, into an emotion. Okay, so that's the short summary for tonight. And with that, let's jump in. And again, remember, we've been studying the Tanya now, and we're coming out of the section where we talked about how important it is to do mitzvahs, physical mitzvahs. Everything hinges on that. You can have all the best feelings and intentions in the world, but if you don't do something about it, it's not actually going to actualize. It's not actually going to happen. But all of the good mitzvahs in the world with no kavanah is like a body without a soul. So chapter 42, in light of what already has been said on this subject of the lower kind of fear, remember last week we talked about 2 levels of fear. Do we have maybe a quick summary or a reflection as to what was the yira tata and the yira ilah, this lower fear? And again, we translated yira, fear, as fear, awe, respect, a feeling of being overwhelmed. That's very good. That works fine. So what's the lower fear? What's this lower feeling of shame before God?
Taking your foot off the pedal if you see it.
There you go. The parable works fine.
Or fear of sin.
Fear of sin. Fear of the strap, right? I know God's in charge, therefore I'm going to do what he says. We have this wonderful system in America where you have this thing, we call it the rule of law. And you say either you're going to do what the American government says, or they're going to sick the government on you, right? This basic fear works incredibly well. Most people don't transgress the law. God, of course, doesn't have police, so it's a little bit different. But it's interesting because as we're going to study here in chapter 42, and as we've studied previously, there's this hidden love that exists within the heart of every believer.
Here is the hound of heaven.
The hound of heaven. This hidden love that exists within each of us has this category of fear within it as well. That reminds me of a parable or a story they told back in Russia. They had the shtetl and the Tsarist government, and they said one of the rabbis was there, and he asked one of his congregants on Passover, look, can you go into the Jewish people's camp? Can you go into the shtetl and find me some chametz? I'm looking for a piece of chametz. I just need one piece of chametz. Give me some leavening. It's Passover at the Jewish camp. Find me a piece of leavening. And he goes out. He's gone for a couple hours. He comes back. I'm sorry, everybody. There is no chametz in the camp. They sold it. They put it away in storage. It doesn't exist. It's not here. We can't get you a single piece. I'm very sorry, Rabbi.
Not a crumb.
Not a crumb. And they said, he said, okay, that's understandable. I appreciate that. But look, I'm looking for some contraband is how I heard it, right? There's some stuff that the government says is illegal, like a Cuban cigar, right? Can you go and get me some contraband, right? He's gone 20 minutes, 25 minutes. He comes back with 6 choices, right? And he says, Rabbona Shalom, Master of the Universe, the Tsar has all this government and all this power and all these policemen and all this law enforcement and all this technology, and they could find 6 choices in 20 minutes. When it comes to your people, you have no guards, you have no policemen, you have no law enforcement, there's no hound of heaven, right? And you can't find a single piece of chametz. So this is the basic level of fear. The basic level of fear is, I know God's in charge. I'm gonna toe the line. I'm gonna do what He says. Right? We talked about the lower love. What's the lower love? Lower love, basic love, and you can chop up the lower fear and love and the higher fear and love based on who it's directed towards. Lower fear and lower love is fear of selfish fear and selfish love. I'm afraid of God because the strap. Right? I don't want to get hurt. And I love God because after all is said and done, I'm a smart guy. I know that all the good things happen from God, so I'm going to get on His good side, and more good stuff should happen to me, right? That's the idea of the lower love. Then there's the higher level of love. I love God because of who He is. It has nothing to do with me. If He's good to me, great. If not, that's fine. I'm just loving the way He works. I just want to watch Him, right? This is rare. We talked before. This is a gift that God gives the tzaddikim, the righteous people, as a reward for their service. It's not something that normal people can attain. Normal people aren't a Twitter-pated with love for God, right? Normal people love human loves, human desires, human pleasures. Normal people love an extra hour in bed in the morning, right? Then there's the higher fear, which again is best, I think, described as awe or even shame, right? You recognize the greatness of God and godliness and who He is, and you're just in awe and almost ashamed to just be in His presence because He's so great and I'm so not, right? Again, focused on Him, not on self. So when we say the lower fear, yira tata, this is the fear of myself. I'm afraid that I'm not going to have, or I'm afraid that I'm going to get hurt, God forbid, and therefore I'm going to do what God says. Whereas the higher level of fear is it doesn't really have to do with me at all. I'm just in awe of You. Make sense? Okay. So in light of what's been already said about that, this lower fear, one will clearly understand the Talmudic comment. Clearly understand. I love the Alter Rebbe's verbiage. And it is a pretty simple chapter, but again, fundamental and practical too. So if you know about the lower fear, says the Alter Rebbe, then the Talmudic comment on the verse will be clearly understood to you. This is the verse we talked about, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12. And now Yisrael, Vata Yisrael, what is it that Hashem, your Elohim, wants of you already? What is it that He's demanding of you? What is He asking of you already? And the verse continues, only to fear the Lord your God. Only to fear Hashem Elokecha. So the Gemara asks, the Talmud asks, well, if this is it, right? Moshe couches this, he phrases this, he delivers this by saying, so what is it already? Like it's something that you could package very small. So the Talmud says, is it so small, really? Is fear of God such a small thing? Says the Talmud. And the Talmud replies, and it says, yeah, it is such a small thing. In the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher of blessed memory, for him, it's very easy, it's very tiny, it's not a big deal. He's a great tzaddik, he's a great righteous man. He says the best prophet that Israel ever had or ever will have. He spoke to God face to face. This is the last verses of Deuteronomy I'm quoting here. And it says that he's such a great prophet. For him, it's easy. Fear of God, of course, he's God. No thing. So, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense when it comes to our service and our observance of God and godliness, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, he's saying his last will and testament. He's giving us, this is the best I got before I go. This is what you need to know. Fear of God, that's what it is. It's so simple. It's so easy. And then the Talmud says, is it really easy? Because most people don't fear God, right? Most people are afraid of bouncing a check or getting pulled over, right? Get a speeding ticket, God forbid, or other things like that as well. So fear of God, is this really such a small thing, says the Talmud? And how does the Talmud answer? We just studied it. What did it say?
It says yes.
How does it say yes?
It says yes. In the case of Moses, it was a small thing.
For Moses, it's small. Is Moshe speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu in Deuteronomy? Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to us. He's speaking to the Jewish people for all eternity. So why do I care if the Talmud says, yeah, it's easy for Moshe? What does it mean? The Talmud doesn't speak Narishkeit. It's here for a reason. What is it supposed to mean? Let's continue. At first glance, the answer is incomprehensible. What do you mean? For Moses, it's easy. We're talking about us. What does Hashem demand of you, says the verse? You, specifically. Moshe is speaking to the Jewish people. He's not speaking to himself. Not of Moshe. The explanation, however, is as follows. Each and every soul of Beit Yisrael, of the house of Yisrael, contains within it something of the quality of Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. Moses, our teacher of blessed memory, because he is one of the 7 shepherds of Israel who cause vitality and godliness to flow to the community of Jewish souls. For which reason they're called shepherds. There's a lot here, so let's unpack it. So first of all, the Alter Rebbe is explaining us. Again, Tanya means this is stuff you should have learned before. You should know this from other places, older places, raw Bible. If you didn't pick it up, well, that's why we're here, right? What kind? Made a bracha earlier. So, each and every soul of the house of Israel contains within it a piece of the great leader, of the great teacher, the great tzaddik of that generation, Moshe Rabbeinu. Have you heard this concept anywhere else before? I don't know anywhere else. No? Never? I disagree, my friend. I disagree.
Explain.
Have you heard it anywhere, perhaps in the later writings of the Bible, perhaps the New Covenant? Ever hear a concept of a great Jewish leader, a great Torah teacher, and that part of his spirit resides within each of us?
Yeshua.
Mashiach, right? That's in there. I'm not making that up, am I? Am I? So I think it's really there. I think it's really true. In the New Testament it says that there's the spirit of Mashiach, right? It lives in each of us, and it helps us in some way to be able to connect to God and to do what we got to do, right? This is what it says. This is exactly what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. And he's saying it in a broader sense, right? We're not saying just Mashiach specifically, but the Torah leader of that generation is going to be a present entity in the reality of your spiritual experience, which is really Kabbalistic and mystical and crazy, right? The same point is extremely simple and basic. Very simple and basic. They say, your teacher, your true teacher, we were talking earlier about different teachers. Your teacher, you learn everything from your teacher, says the writings. Everything you learn from your teacher. Well, that's not true because I learn from lots of different people, right? You ever go to a conference and there's like 98 different lessons that are there and you go and hear from 98 different people. So a real teacher, your real teacher, whoever your real teacher is, everything that you hear from somebody else gets filtered through the eyes and mouth of that teacher, right? You hear everything from the voice or the understanding of the teacher because that teacher is the one who put the quality of being able to absorb and study Torah within you. So everything that you get is going to be in that frame of reference, right? We've talked before like the security blanket, right? Mm-hmm. There's this aspect of when I came into godly understanding, and that's going to couch and shape and frame everything that comes into my little God window. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So in the very basic sense, who gave us the Torah? Hashem gives us the Torah. Who was the teacher who he gave us to expound it and disseminate it for us? Moshe. Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha Lakilat Yaakov. Or in the Pirkei Avot, Moshe kibbel Torah Sinai. Moses got the Torah from Sinai. He gave it to us. It's the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. This is what it is. So in that sense, everything that's Torah comes through Moshe, and therefore there's a piece of Moshe that lives within each of us every time we study Torah. So very basic, but very lofty, very spiritual concept here, but also incredibly, I think, very practical and basic. And we're going to explore this concept for the rest of the chapter. It says that Moshe is one of these 7 shepherds, and this gives him the ability to be able to connect to this Da'at Elyon, as we'll soon see. And we can connect to this supernal heavenly knowledge through Moshe, our teacher, because he's one of those 7 shepherds. Have you guys heard about this before, the 7 shepherds of Israel? Mm-hmm. Do we know who the 7 shepherds are?
I don't remember them all.
So, going from, I guess, your right to your left, with David in the center, Adam, Shet, Mesushelach, Adam, Seth, Methuselah, David, Abraham, Jacob, Moshe. Did I get that right? Abraham, Yaakov, Moshe, Rabbi. So those are the 7 shepherds of Israel. And these tzaddikim, these righteous, holy men, have this spiritual je ne sais quoi, that gives them the ability to connect a baby soul of Israel to the supernal knowledge of God, which is exactly what we said Moshe did, right? He's the one who connects us to Torah. Torah is the wisdom of God. So this is the quality of a shepherd. And as we'll soon see, we'll just read this next line real quick and then double back. Moshe Rabbeinu Alev Shalom, our teacher Moshe of blessed memory, is the sum of them all, because, of course, he gave us a Torah, and because the Zohar refers to him as the Raya Mehemna. What's the Raya Mehemna? It's the section in Zohar traditionally authored by Moshe Rabbeinu, but literally in Aramaic it means the faithful shepherd. Moshe is the faithful shepherd, as opposed to the other shepherds. So there's a little bit of interesting information if we can kind of, I guess, as they say, push the pause button here. At the bottom of the column on the left here of 218, it says the 7 shepherds who cause vitality and godliness to flow to all the community of the Jewish souls. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So in the Hebrew here, that's represented as chiyut, the elokut, life, vitality, and elokut, godliness, spirituality. That's what they cause to flow. So in the Hebrew here, it's chayut, the elokut. It says that it actually says this on the map of Tanya. We'll talk about it a lot tonight. It says that the Alter Rebbe would review the entire book of Tanya before he added a single letter. And one day his brother walked in. This is an oral tradition we have about the author of the Tanya here. So I just think it's very interesting. The Alter Rebbe's brother, I guess, had walked in. And the Alter Rebbe was pondering, writing the Tanya here. And he said, "What you thinking about?" "Hey, bro, what you think about?" And he said, "I've been thinking for 6 weeks." 6 weeks, said the Alter Rebbe. Whether to say chiyut elokut or chiyut ve elokut. He was thinking for 6 weeks whether to put the vav here in the before godliness. So the verse would say otherwise. Moses is one of the 7 shepherds who cause godly vitality to come down to the entire community of Israel. But that's not what he wrote. He said vitality, and godliness to the people. 6 weeks it took him to make that decision. It just gives us an idea how precise the Tanya is, like the Torah. Right? So very interesting. So we have this quality of the great Torah leaders, the great Torah teachers. The tzaddik, as we'll soon see, of each generation is kind of with us in a certain sense. And this kind of helps us to connect to the supernal knowledge of God and godliness. And that thereby becomes part of our connection to God. And therefore there's a piece of the great leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, Mashiach, that exists within the soul of every one of Israel. Kosh? Kosh. So this means that he brings down the quality of da'at. What's da'at? Knowledge. How is da'at different from bina and chokhmah? How is knowledge different than wisdom, as Kabbalah describes it, and understanding? What's the difference? Is knowledge and understanding the same thing?
Closer than.
It's closer than that in wisdom, right? I'll give you that. It's a sequential process. I'll give you that. So in that sense, chokhmah is the spark, bina is the fuel, and da'at is the flame. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's an expansion.
It's an expansion process. Mm-hmm. I believe it's described in the Talmud or possibly elsewhere that there's a spring that comes from a mountain. You know, like mountains have speed driving down the highway, and you see like the water is like frozen out of the rock wall there. There's a spring that comes out of the rock, and that spring flows into a river, and the river flows into the ocean, right? So that's chokhmah bina da'at, they say. The spring is the chokhmah. It's a little bit of...
There's actually an intermediate thing there, too. It's usually little streams and then bigger streams and then the rivers.
Let's not get lost here.
Right.
Chokhmah would be the spring. Bina would be the river. Da'at would be the ocean, right? This ocean of knowledge. And that's kind of cool because it's what it says in Isaiah, right? When Mashiach comes, the whole world is going to be filled with the knowledge of God, Das Elyon, or Das Hashem, with like the water covers the seabed, right? Which is the meaning of the new covenant, by the way, and the giving of the Ruach HaKodesh. Back burner that because we're going to come back to it this chapter. So da'at is this quality of knowledge. How is knowledge different than understanding? Understanding is ability to get it, right? I have processing, wheels are turning, right? You see somebody like, the wheels are turning with that one right there because he's looking like, thinking about something over there? Yeah. So the wheels are turning, that's understanding. Chokhmah is like the inspiration that gets the wheels to turn. What happens after they turn? What are you left with?
You incorporate it.
You incorporate it. You integrate it, right? What does that do to you when you integrate something?
It changes you.
How? You're absolutely right. How?
It changes everything. It changes your life. It changes how you see things, how you reason, how you respond to other people, how you run your life, how the light in you from God is a conduit that's more pure as opposed to your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own emotions. Now they're God's feelings, God's emotions, God's understanding.
Okay, in the sense of da'at elyon, right? A godly understanding or a godly knowledge and awareness.
The more you understand God, the more you understand
everything.
His way as opposed to your thinking. And your thinking is removed. You don't think it anymore.
Right. So let's talk about our thinking.
So it's the application of God's wisdom.
That's essentially what we're trying to get at
and
here.
And it goes on according to each's capacity of his soul and its root from above.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to hone in on here, the capacity of his soul. So what does that mean for us? I know I'm drilling this and belaboring it a little bit, but when you have knowledge of something, what does it do to the way you process yourself or anything? Anything that comes in, there's a part of your brain in the back called the cerebellum, right? And it's designed to recognize pattern input. So you see stuff, for example, you're driving down the highway and like 48 minutes have gone by, 42 minutes have gone by, and you're like, how did I get here, right? It's kind of scary because, you know, you're driving a car at the time. Right? And it's all happening on autopilot, which again is kind of terrifying. How does that happen? There's a part of your brain that recognizes this same pattern of input, and it says, I don't have to focus right now because I know what's coming next. I don't need to waste and spend my precious thought capacity on watching the needle rise. I know it's going to rise, right? Or go down or whatever the situation is. So here's what
sounds like an Einsteinian thing.
It's neuroscience, I guess you could say. But yeah. So this is what I'm trying to drive at. You have an inspiration. This is something the cerebellum's not going to attach to, right? This is new, right? Some kind of new inspiration. Okay, that's going to cause the wheels to turn. It's going to cause Bina to activate so that you're going to look at it and be like, I need to understand this, figure out what's going on, right? This is problem-solving mode. This is the development going on in your brain. After you've developed, after you've thought about it, after you've come to a conclusion, right? Da'at is like a conclusion. Now I have the knowledge of that situation. How does that change my behavior?
You act according to the knowledge.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
You act according to the knowledge.
You act according to the knowledge that you've acquired. Absolutely true. So, for example, if I know that there is and da'at is like an opinion, right? So if I know, for example, you could look at believers, right? Torah. Use the word Torah. Or how about law? That's a little more sticky, right? You talk to a believer about law, and you have someone from one perspective, and they hear the word law, let's say from a more traditional Protestant perspective, and they hear the word law, what's the first thing they're going to think?
We're no longer under the law.
It has nothing to do with me. It's a big, scary thing that I don't have to worry about at all. How does that happen? You didn't even think about that at all. You didn't even give it 2 seconds to think about what the law means, and you've already dismissed it because you know already. You have this opinion already. It's already fully developed. You have the knowledge. It's integrated, like you had said before, that I don't need to worry about that, right? You talk to someone like else about law, and that person is going to start thinking, oh yeah, Rambam, I wonder what the portion is for today, or how am I supposed to specifically walk out this aspect of God's will, and they think about it in an entirely different way. They hear the word Torah, and it's like, oh, that's good and safe, I'll listen for a second, right? You hear the word law, and they say, this is not for me, right? He's not for me. So, that's da'at. We need to have a good understanding of that if we're going to move forward, and I'm sorry for taking too much time to talk about it, but when you have this opinion, and it's established, then it changes the way you process things, changes the way you feel. Da'at is the beginning of feeling, right? It's an opinion. I have the knowledge of it. How do you feel about it? Yes, no. I like, I don't. Pleasure, pain, right? And that's where chesed and gevurah stem from.
See, where I come up with that, obviously, is what follows when I say we're no longer under the law, we're under grace, which totally dismisses
the concept of the law in general. Because you can't have grace without law. It doesn't function.
Agree.
Right?
But that's the danger. That's what's scary.
And we got to watch ourselves, too, when you think about it, because we read the Bible all the time, and we study stuff, and you've seen stuff before, and you run into it and you're like, oh yeah, I know that. I don't need to process it anymore. That's danger. That's dangerous thinking. The Talmud and Rashi say that you can't judge what you're reading now based on what's going to happen later in the chapter, right? You have to understand it now as is. So it's about being present in the moment. All right, so I don't want to take too much more time on this, but that's the gist.
You know, one way that I've heard da'at interpreted, and it's not real common, but goes along with what you just said, mindfulness.
Mindfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Whatever it is, I don't need to access Bina anymore. I've processed it. I have the stamp, I have the printout, I have the report. It looks like this. Allow it in, don't allow it in, right? So that's part of it. Okay, so what does a shepherd do? Specifically, the faithful shepherd, but all the shepherds, they bring down the quality of da'at to Yisrael, that they should know God. That's a shepherd. That's what they do. What's a shepherd do? Watches after the flock, right? So the shepherd comes in here and gives you this the tapping into this da'at elyon, this higher knowledge, specifically knowledge of God, right? And now I have this stamp, this opinion, this printout of what God is, and now I process my life differently. My behavior is automatically changed. They say when you come to faith, it's like changes you forever, because you got a new dot, right? You got a new understanding, a new knowledge, that now it's not just the way it was before. There's another level, and that's going to change the way I process everything. And that, we were talking a little bit earlier, I think is the key to being able to know God face to face, which is what the Alter Rebbe is trying to tell us here, starting with fear and love. And again, fear is the basic entry level of, without fear, there's no wisdom. That's the lower level of fear. You can't have Torah wisdom. And without Torah wisdom, you can't have the higher fear, which is coming to God face to face. Did you?
No, I'm just saying, from what I said before,
Sure.
again, we're no longer under the law, we're under grace, but that leads again. They have no idea what the fear of the Lord is.
And now they're serving God with a bird with one wing. And they're going in little circles, and things aren't happening, and they're wondering, well, maybe it's all fake anyways, right? That's a working of Satan. That's how it happens.
Scary.
It is. The whole world will be deceived, yeah?
I was thinking about that this week.
It's heavy. Like Marty McFly heavy, you know? All right. Sorry. Back to Tanya.
Back to the future.
Back to the Tanya. All right, so the shepherd gives you, lets you tap into the dot so that they can know God, each according to the capacity of his soul and its root above, its shoresh. We talked about the root of your soul. What does that look like? Do we remember? We have our handy-dandy chart.
It comes from where you come from.
Oh, the Sephirah?
Right. So you're going to be rooted
in the worlds.
in a sphere of some sort. You're going to be rooted in a world of some sort. You're going to be rooted in a aspect of that, right? Like we do in the Omar. You're the Netzach of Gevura, of the world of Asiya, maybe, and you're the Nefesh level of it. You're the most external level of that. So we did the math. I think it's like a couple thousand different places where your soul could be rooted. And that's where that's gonna be your power source through which you take in all the information. Like we said, the frame that lets all of the light come in through the window. So each according to his root, the root of his soul, and according to the nurture from the root of the soul of our teacher Moshe Rabbeinu of blessed memory, which is rooted in Da'at Elyon. So how does it work? In Judaism, typically we don't like the concept of intermediaries. It's not, you want to talk to God, talk to God. He's listening right now, go talk. But there's two different kinds of intermediaries. There's a prohibitory sort of intermediary. This is what we call a flapper system. And then there's a facilitating intermediary. This is someone who lets you reach a place higher than you could yourself. I can't climb I don't really do a lot of climbing. I guess a 12-foot wall by myself. I don't think I could jump up and climb a 12-foot wall by myself. But if you were helping me, you gave me a foot up, I could reach a place that I couldn't before, right? That's a facilitating intermediary. That's what Moshe is. That's what Mashiach is. Not someone who says, no, you can't talk to God. You just talk to me and I'll tell you whatever I think he's going to say. That's not what we're talking about. So that's the quality of Moshe Rabbeinu specifically, and shepherds in general, that they can connect to the Da'at Elyon, and that way you can connect to them and get a glimpse. And Moshe Rabbeinu is rooted in the world of Atzilut, dot in the 10 Sefirot of Atzilut, the highest level of the four worlds we talked about, the place where everything's connected to God, everything's one with God, which are united with their blessed emanator, like we just said, for he and his knowledge are one, and he is the knowledge, and the knower, and the known, as Maimonides, the Rambam says, of blessed memory. God is Mada Yodea and Yodua, right? He's the knower, the knowledge, and the known. And the Alter Rebbe says, if you're having trouble understanding that, the concept that God is the one who's knowing, and he's the faculty by which the subject matter is known, and he's the subject matter that's being learned about. God is all of this, and the Kabbalists agree. And in the Rambam says, if you're having trouble figuring this out, stop, because no human could possibly figure this out. It's way beyond our realization capabilities. You can't look God right in the face like that. So this is the concept. So, what did the Alter Rebbe tell us in this second paragraph here? Lots of stuff, right? He said that there's these shepherds, the Torah teachers, and as we'll soon see in the next paragraph, the Torah teachers of every generation. And they have this ability to connect to God and godliness, specifically the knowledge of God. And when we can connect to them, then we can connect to the godly knowledge. Make sense? Facilitating intermediary. How did the chapter start? Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the people, what does God want from you already? And he says, just fear him. And the Talmud jumps in and says, is fear of God such a small thing? And the Talmud answers, yeah, for Moshe Rabbeinu, it's simple and easy. And the Alter Rebbe says, how does that help us at all? He's talking to you. Like, how are you supposed to connect to God? And this is your answer. Because Moshe Rabbeinu connects to God. You connect to Moshe Rabbeinu, you can connect to God. Right? You want to know about God? Hang out with a tzaddik. Hang out with a Torah scholar. Someone who lives and breathes this stuff every day, and you're going to learn about God. Back in the day, in Yeshua's time even, people would just do whatever the rabbi did. They'd just follow him around all day, every day. And whatever little mannerisms he would do, and they caught on to a pattern, they would adopt that into their service. Right? This would be their tradition now. It says that in the Hayom Yom, I believe. In the morning, we do the hand washing, right? You wake up because, sleep is 1/60th of death, and you have a little impurity on it when you sleep. So before you say God's name, you wash your hands. You make the bracha al natilat yadayim, and you wash your hands, and you take the cup, and you pour it on your hand, and then the other way, and then the other way, and the other way, and then the last one, right? The Middler Rebbe, or one of the Rebbes, at the end there, he would cup that last bit, because there's always a little extra at the end. He'd cup that last bit of water, and he would do this. He would rub his hands together like that. And that's like a Chabad custom now, that's how it happens, because they saw him doing it every day, and they're like, well, that must mean something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do it that way, right? This is the concept. You connect to the person who's connected to God, and you'll connect to God too, right? That's how this all works out. When Moshe Rabbeinu says, is fear of God such a small thing? Talmud jumps in and says, it's not for him. Hang out around him, right? Because that's how you're going to be able to figure it out. So that's basic, simple, basic. But it goes much loftier than that too. There's a whole spiritual side of this. There's a whole spiritual aspect of this that which we'll explore a little bit further presently. So next paragraph. Questions on that so far? In addition and beyond, like Buzz Lightyear, right? Mm-hmm. In addition and beyond, this general influence to the community as a whole, there descend in every generation. Every generation, it says that God saw that the tzaddikim were few, so he spread them out over all the generations, the righteous people. There descend in every generation sparks from the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. Moses, our teacher of blessed memory, peace to him. And they clothe themselves in the body and the soul of the sages in that generation. So there's a little piece of Moshe Rabbeinu that exists within the tzaddik, the leading tzaddik of the foundation of that generation, whoever it is. So presumably not too long ago, this was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory, right? Who was the seventh generation here from the Alter Rebbe. And those sages are called the eyes of the congregation. We know that all a congregation is, all the body of Israel is likened to a real actual body with limbs. And you say in our bodies there's 75 trillion cells, so something along those lines. So everybody's got a part, everybody's got a role. There's lots of different cells that form together to make various different tissues, and the different tissues are going to connect to make various different organs, and the organs are going to work together to make organ systems, and the organ systems work together to make a body, right? So which part of the body are you? I'm the kishka. The sage of the generation would be the eyes, right? To impart the knowledge to the people, because the eyes are the window of the soul, that they might know about the greatness of God and serve him with heart and soul. This is what we said before. What does God want from you already? Just to fear him. How am I supposed to fear him? I fear earthquakes and tsunamis and terrorists, God forbid, and all this other stuff. You want to learn how to fear God? Hang out with the tzaddik of that generation. Hang out with a great Torah teacher, someone like Moshe Rabbeinu, and you're going to end up being real godly. You're going to get the fear of God down pat, and then you're going to develop further along the path of godliness, right? To the point where you could even get to the higher fear someday, right? And we said earlier that the higher love is a gift from God. It's not something that we can acquire through hard work, whereas the higher fear is something we can acquire through hard work. You live a whole lifetime of following God's will and God's mitzvot and doing everything and towing the line, you will end up at that place where you see God in a sense of awe, not because of yourself, but because of Him. That's natural. That's a progression you can definitely make. So, for the service of the heart, according to Da'at, as is written, you should know Hashem, the God of your father, and serve Him with a perfect heart and with a willing mind. And that comes to us from 1 Chronicles 28. But regarding the Messianic era, what's going to be different about the Messianic era? Is that too hard a question to ask? Sorry. Pass. Can you phone a friend?
Would you like to reach out for help?
Yeah.
What is this? Cash cab?
Well, you could reach out to me, I'll tell you. What's different about the Messianic era? What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? He's going to remove the spirit of impurity from the earth. What's the spirit of impurity from the earth? The klipa. What did the klipa do? Hide God. So now everybody's going to be able to see Him. And they're all going to say, what's the new covenant says? No one will anyone ever say, know the Lord. Here, let me teach you about God, right? All the rabbis are going to be out of business. L'chaim.
They shall all know me.
Because no one needs to be taught anymore because they'll see, right? So in the Messianic era, this whole process we're describing is not going to necessarily apply because you're not going to need to connect to Moshe Rabbeinu. You could just connect to God. He's right there, right? As it's written, and no longer shall every man teach his neighbor, know the Lord, saying, for they shall all know me. However, the essence and the knowledge is not the knowing alone, that people should know the greatness of God from authors and books, but the essential thing is to immerse one's mind deeply into the greatness of God and to fix one's thought on Hashem with all the strength and the vigor of the heart and mind until that his thought should be bound to God with a strong and mighty bond as it's bound to a material thing that he sees with his physical eyes, and he concentrates on it in his thought. Again, very difficult for us. How easy is that? It's easy for me to focus on this cup and be like, wow, I need some more, right? Because I see it. For God, it's too abstract. It's too out there. It's not concrete enough, that's for sure, right? So this is going to take energy, effort, input, concentration, meditation, focus. In a word, kavanah, love and fear. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us now. He says, okay, we said you want to learn about the fear of God, you connect to a good Torah scholar, right? You connect to a Moshe Rabbeinu, you connect to the tzaddik of that generation, you connect to the Rebbe. And now the Alter Rebbe, of course, was the Rebbe of his generation. So he's going to tell us, here's how it's done. You want to know? Let's study. For it is known that da'at connotates union, as in the phrase, Adam yada es Chava. Adam knew Eve. In this place, in Genesis 4, what's it talking about? What's the story? Do you remember what happened in Genesis 4? What happened after Adam knew Eve?
Pretty much blew it.
Yikes.
4:1.
What did Eve go through?
She begot Cain.
She had children, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does yada mean? Comes from the root word da'at. You saw that, Seinfeld? You can't yada that. It's in the Bible. You can't yada that. It's right here. There's the yada right there. So that's probably inappropriate. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. So what happened when Adam yada et Chava, right? That meant that means that they were intimate. That they were sexually intimate and that she bore children from this, right? Mm-hmm. Does this give you a new concept of what da'at is? It's not just, knowledge like I know a fact like 2 + 2 is 4. But this is something that you feel in an incredibly intimate way. That your reality and your outlook is changed forever because of this knowledge. Because there's something you know that maybe somebody else doesn't. And this is now going to change the way you see everything. This is the difference between a believer and a non-believer. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. You have this knowledge they don't have. So when good things happen to you, you say Baruch Hashem. When bad things happen to you, you say Baruch Hashem. You say Gamzula Tova maybe. But, you see everything differently because of this knowledge, right? Because of who you're connected to, intimately connected to, right? To the point where it's going to produce offspring. So this capacity and this quality of attaching one's knowledge to Hashem is present in every soul of the house of Israel by virtue of its nurture from the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, Alev Shalom, peace to him. It says all the souls of the house of Israel, they suckle from Moshe Rabbeinu's soul. All the souls, they know that God's connected to Moshe and that the Torah comes from Mount Sinai. God gives it to Moshe and Moshe gives it to us. So we all go to Moshe, we suckle the Torah from Moshe, right? It's pretty basic. I'm talking about spiritual stuff, but it's pretty basic. Only since the soul has clothed itself in a body. Okay, so that's fantastic. It works great up in heaven right before you ever get born into a body down here. Up in heaven, all the souls, they go around Moshe Rabbeinu and they're like, yeah, teach us the Torah, it's wonderful. And they get the Torah and they're like, oh, Baruch Hashem, you kiss the Torah. What happens when we come down here? Is it that easy to see Moshe Rabbeinu's soul now? We just said it was here. There's a piece of him inside me right now, and all of us all the time. So why is it so hard to see? Because of the klipa. The Kabbalah says the body is called a niska dechivya. It's a serpent's skin, right? And your soul's like a princess, and she's wrapped up and bound in a serpent skin. And she's trapped here. And what does she see? The prison cell, right? You see the mud and the blood and the beer and everything else that's here. And you don't see God and godliness, and the world's not crackling with spiritual intensity and spirituality, right? So when you get clothed into a body, now what needs to happen? You need this great and mighty exertion, doubled and redoubled. Remember what we're studying here? This is how you learn the fear of God. This is how you learn to know God. We're giving you the instruction manual here. Very simple. I think I wrote it down in a step-by-step process here first. Okay, yeah, we'll get to that. So, first thing we need to do, recognize that the odds are stacked against you. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be difficult. You have a body. You remember we talked about the two souls, right? You got the godly soul and the animal soul. And the godly soul represents God and godliness. It's like God. What is the sound God made at Mount Sinai when he spoke to Eliyahu, the prophet Elijah? There was the big fire and the clouds and the darkness and the thick darkness, and it was a still small voice, right? They tell a story about Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph, Yaakov's son, and he was down in Egypt, and he was in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife was trying to come on to him, and it was a very uncomfortable, weird situation for him, and she had some information that they said she got from the astrologers, and the astrologers, they saw in the stars that it's going to be her bloodline was going to be mixed with Yosef's bloodline, and they were going to produce great offspring. It was going to be a wonderful thing. She saw kings descending from Yosef, right? So, there's something to astrology. Cool. However, it's inaccurate. It's incomplete.
Her reading of that prophecy was misread.
How so?
It was her daughter.
It was her daughter, right? They said the Redeemer of Israel, they said to Pharaoh earlier, said the astrologers, the Redeemer of Israel is going to die by water. So he takes all the babies and throws them in the Nile. He died by the waters of strife when he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock, right? So also her line was tied to Joseph's, but it came through her daughter Osnas, right? Not through her. So she was trying to come onto Yosef and come onto Yosef and grab onto Yosef and find ways that she could get alone with Yosef, right? And Yosef is a tzaddik. He's a righteous guy. He's like, well, if it's in the stars, maybe this is something that I should pursue. And how did he not? Why? What was it? The final thing that, or not the final thing, but Yosef said, I know that this is not holy because of what? He says because she's being a total nudnik, right? She's being a total pest. The godly soul is still and small and quiet and soft and friendly and nice. And here's a suggestion. If you'd like to take it, it's right here. It's ready for you. Whereas the animal soul is big and booming. It's like a bull. It's running around. It's like a goat. It's stubborn. It's trying to get at you all the time. It's biting at you, right? That was how he was like, this is obviously coming from the animal side, right? This is not a godly thing because she's being a total pest. So, kind of very practical. Very practical. So, you have this godly soul inside with the piece of Moshe Rabbeinu inside, and it's connected to God and Das Elyon and the highest knowledge of God, right? And this intimacy with God. And it's totally overwhelmed by the big, booming animal voice that says, I'm hungry, I'm tired, when is this guy going to shut up so I can go home, right? And all this other stuff that our animal souls are thinking, and some of us are very good at controlling that. Others, we all need work, of course. But the whole idea here is that you're going to need to have to fight this fight now. there's going to be a fight here. So exertion, doubled and redoubled. Steps, 2 steps. Step number 1, first, crush the body. You need to weary the flesh and crush the body and its submission, the submission of the body after it's crushed, so that it will no longer obscure the light of the soul, as been mentioned above in chapter 29. What did we learn in chapter 9? The Rosh Yeshiva Began Eden, the head of the Torah Academy in heaven. What did he say? If the log's not going to catch fire, you remember that? I think you were here for that.
Mm-hmm.
The log is big and it's it's big and it's booming and it's hard and it's strong, right?
Take it out.
Yeah, it's not catching fire. What do you got to do? Says the Mashiach, right? Says the Rosh Yeshiva Began Eden. He says, take it out of the fire and chop it up and break it up. When you break it up, you'll be able to see the light through it. The heat will be able to get through it, and it will ignite. It will catch. Right? So that's exactly right. So what do you need to do? First, you need to get rid of some of these things that are powering the animal soul. What kind of things power the animal soul?
Anger.
Anger. How dare he do that to me? Does he know who I am? I can't believe this. You ever say, I can't believe in your head before? I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that's... What exactly are you believing in, right? We believe in God. God makes all things happen. What do you mean you can't believe that? So we need to find a way to limit the anger, limit the emotion. That's good. What else?
Everything that you want, pretty much, is usually the animal soul.
Right.
You want it your way.
Okay.
In your mind, it's very logical. It's very sound. It's not like you're irrational. It all makes perfect sense. Problem.
There's 1,000 excuses and rationales for...
Right. I used to say to the kids, if you are rationalizing, you're already going in the wrong
You're
direction.
already wrong. Yeah, I remember that
Right.
well. Moving on. So, the animal soul is going to want the stuff that it wants, right? It's going to be selfishly motivated. What does that mean? I need money now. I need food now. I need sleep now. I need respect now. I need all of it right now. And if I don't get it, I'm going to fight and scratch and kill to get it, right? That's the animal soul. So how does it grow, the animal soul? Every time you feed it, right? So every time you do something that's animalistic or animal-oriented, which is why we don't do those things on Yom Kippur, right? What are the things we don't do on Yom Kippur? We don't eat, we don't drink, we don't engage in intimacy or reproduction, we don't wear shoes, right? We don't do these things because we don't need that, because we're emphasizing the spiritual side of us on Yom Kippur. Every time you dress up in nice clothes and you make sure that you have, every time you sleep, every time you eat, every time you get money in your hand and you spend it on something that you want and not something that God told you specifically to do, you're feeding the animal soul. So those things are what we're talking about when we say crushing the body. You want to limit some of this excess pleasure seeking, and that will help the godliness to shine through. That's step number 1. Are we kosher on step number 1? Break up the body, which means limit the pleasure intake, right? Again, we're not talking about being miserable. You have to serve God with joy. But we overdo it a lot, and I think everybody knows what that means. As Rabbi Gordon of blessed memory said, just because the meat is kosher, you don't got to finish the cow. Just because the wine is kosher, you don't have to finish the case, etc., etc. Okay. This is what we talked about in the name of the Zohar, that a body into which the light of the soul does not penetrate should be crushed, similar to a log, which is accomplished by means of penitential reflections upon the depths of the heart, as is explained there. Take a look back at chapter 29, you'll learn all about it. The second part of this first step here is recognizing how despicable and disgusting the animal side of us is, right? And it really has no place. And God strapped us with it, and it's important, but it's only important like an animal, like an ox that's harnessed with the yoke of heaven, right? There's many crops, many harvests that are contained in the ox. If you could harness that energy, if you could yoke the energy, and then it can accomplish all these things, right? And your body's going to fight that, resist that, because I don't want to, and why should I? And if you treat it like a beast of burden as opposed to a wilde chayas, a wild animal, it can accomplish a lot, right? The ox doesn't say in the morning,
I don't want to plow today.
yeah, right, the farmer comes up and says, you know what, I'm not even thinking about it. Can I just take a personal day, please, Mr. Farmer? They give the ox a zetz and they get him out in the field, right? That's what happens. All right, point number 2. Next is the exertion of the soul. So first we talked about limiting the pleasure seeking and looking penitentially at oneself. Yes, I did sin. Yes, I am despicable. That's very uncomfortable. I need to now free myself of this by returning to God, right? Next step is the exertion of the soul, that the service shouldn't be burdensome to it, right? We need to intellectually connect and realize that the stuff that we do for God is for God and not just something that we're doing, right? When we recognize and delve into the greatness of God and who he is, that gives us the ability then to recognize, okay, when I put on tefillin, it's not just a waste of 5 minutes of my time. It's because I'm doing it for him, this guy that I've been thinking about this whole time, right? To exert its thought, exertion of the soul, that the servant shouldn't be burdensome, to exert its thought and to delve and reflect upon the greatness of Hashem for a long and interrupted period. We said this before. We need to set aside times every day to meditate about the greatness of God. I mean, how often every day do we think about what's your entertainment of choice? You watch movies or something, right? Sports. How often every day are we thinking about the sports game that's coming up, or the stats from the last one, or this trade, or that, whatever the situation might be? The more we think about that, the more respect and awe we get for that, right? Mm-hmm. How much time do we spend thinking about God? Rabbi Gordon of blessed memory said, if you watch movies every day, you're probably going to grow up and be a great movie critic, right? You study Torah every day, you're probably going to be a great believer, right? So we need to meditate about and reflect on the greatness of God for a long and interrupted period. How long should it be? It depends. It's different for everybody. Like we said, the root of everyone's soul is a little bit different. So the measure of this long uninterrupted period is not the same for every soul. There is the naturally refined soul, which you just think about God for a second, and all of a sudden it's like comes and hits you again like a rush, and you're like, okay, I totally remember, I'm in it, right? And you have other people, it's maybe takes a little bit longer, right? A minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. A lifetime. May God protect us. But the idea is it's going to take a little bit different time for every person. Some people, you could just think it for a second, and it'll flash on, and it'll be great. Other people, you're going to need to develop that. You're going to need to work on that, train yourself to be able to do that. And it's all thinking about the greatness of God. Think how big he is. Think how great he is. Think about how he made all the angels, how powerful the angels are, but he doesn't want the angels, he chose us, right? Think about the connection. Think about him taking us out of Egypt. Whatever it takes. And these 9 chapters of love and fear are going to give us lots of tools in that direction to be able to help us to think about some things so that we can focus on, so that we have some content on which we can meditate the greatness of God. Does that make sense? So there is the natural refined soul, which immediately, as soon as he considers the greatness of God, attains a fear and dread of God. And like I said, it hits you like your chest gets tight, and you're all of a sudden you're like we talked the other day about getting pulled over or something, right? Or just seeing a police officer on the side of the road. Right. Did you ever get pulled over? What's the first thing that you get tight in the chest? You're like, oh, right? It's happening right now. Okay. Best behavior, get the checklist down. Yes, good evening, officer. What can I do for you today, right? And you start thinking about all this stuff, right? So sometimes that takes a second. Sometimes you actually have to get pulled over for you to feel it, right? But we can awaken it through meditation in our heads, in our hearts, by allotting time for it, allocating time for it. Meditate about God every day. As is written in the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, this is an interesting point too. We're talking about mystical, spiritual stuff here, right? Meditating about the greatness of God and the higher spheres and the heavens and all this stuff. And this is practical. It's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, the regular halacha, everybody's supposed to do every day. And where? In section 1 of Orach Chaim, the stuff that we're supposed to do every day. This is basic service, basic fear of God. We need to be able to kick this on somehow. So, meditate. For a man, this is facilitated like we discussed in chapter 41. You put the talus over your head, you think about God's kingship is covering you. You put on the tefillin, you think about binding your heart and mind to God, etc., etc. For women, they're built with the Bluetooth already, right? They have other things that we don't even know about, I'm sure, that connect them to God in a much more profound way. But the technology is similar, right? That we should be able to meditate on God's greatness, and that should inspire us with a basic level of fear of him, or awe of him. This is what it says in Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. When a man reflects on that, that the great Melech Malchei Amlachim, the great supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, with whose glory the whole world is full. And this is what we said is one of these verses the Rabbi asked us to memorize from last chapter, I believe. That the King of the world, He stands over you, and He's looking at you, and the whole earth is full of His glory. But He's looking into your heart to see if you're serving Him as is fitting. That's one of the verses the Rebbe asked us to memorize. So the great supreme King, the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, whose glory fills the world, is full of the world is full of His glory. He stands over you, and He sees your actions, and He will immediately be overcome with fear. This is like a person who's like pretty good at this, right? He thinks about it for a second. He's like, oh, right. And he does what he's supposed to do, right? However, maybe it's not like that for everybody. There is a soul that's lowly of nature and origin, coming from the lower gradations of the 10 spirit of the world of Asiya. Remember, we talked about the 4 worlds. Atzilut's the highest. Asiya is the lowest. Asiya means action. Which cannot discover godliness by contemplation except with difficulty and with forcefulness. You really got to try hard. They say you want to focus better, you do this. I don't think it works like that, but if it helps, God bless you. So with lots of difficulty and forcefulness, especially if it had been contaminated by sins of youth, for sins interposed between us and God, remember. Every time you commit a sin, this is another barrier that soul is going to have to pierce through to awaken this fear within him, which is why it's so much easier to do it intellectually. But it's not going to become awakened in the heart unless you do this meditation. You think about it often enough to be able to pierce through all those layers that you put up between you and God, these iron curtains you erected with the sins. As explained in Sefer Chasadim, chapter 35. Nevertheless, by dint of forceful effort, when his thought greatly exerts itself with much vigor and toil and intense concentration, immersing in the contemplation of the greatness of God for a considerable time, there will certainly come to him, at any rate, at least the lower level of fear, Yer Tata, referred to above. And as the rabbis of blessed memory have said, and this is another one of the verses, the 12 verses the Rebbe asked us to memorize. He gave little children to memorize these verses. If the little children are supposed to have these verses down pat, how much more so should we? Here's one of them. And it's found in the Megillah chapter, or not in the Megillah, but in Talmud Megillah, page 6, side B. The saying goes like this: I have labored and I found. The labor starts like this. If you find someone who... the verse starts, if you find someone, he says, I didn't try, and I'm not sure if it starts this way or the other way, but let's just go with this for right now, for simplicity. If you found someone who says, I didn't try, and it just happened to me, don't believe him, says the Talmud. If you find someone who says, I tried, but it didn't happen for me, don't believe him, says the Talmud. You find someone who says, I have tried and I succeeded, that person you can believe, says the Talmud. Powerful verse. So you find somebody who's like, I don't know, it just happened, don't believe him. You find someone who says, I tried as hard as I could, but it didn't come together, don't believe him. You find someone who says, I worked really hard, and here it is. You can believe him. That's one of the verses the Rebbe asks us to memorize. It's also written, if you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord. This is from Proverbs, chapter 2. So, and the parable I think I heard for this was...
Isn't there one like Yeshua says a pearl is hidden?
Where do you think he got it?
I don't know.
So the idea is if you have a pearl or $1 million, this is the way I heard it, buried in your backyard, I can tell you with 100% certain that in your backyard at this very moment, there's $1 million buried there. What would you do?
Dig up your backyard.
How much?
Get a good shovel.
A good shovel? You'd call in the backhoe for $1 million, right? You wouldn't say like, yeah, I looked for it, but I couldn't find it. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't exist, Maybe no one could find it. But you go and you dig and you dig and you get metal detectors and you get construction equipment and you excavate the whole thing and you find the $1 million because you know that it's there, right? So also we can find the fear of God, the hidden love of God within our hearts that's buried there. But it's buried under all these layers of klipot, all these layers of separation which we've set up between us and God because of our sins, some intentional, some otherwise. Does that make sense?
Seek and search.
Seek and search like a hidden treasure. This means in the manner of a man seeking a hidden treasure, or the wealth buried in the depths of the earth, for which he digs with tireless toil. So must one delve with unflagging energy in order to bring the light of the treasure, in order to bring to light the treasure of the fear of heaven, which lies buried and concealed in the understanding of the heart of every Jewish individual, everyone connected to theology. This being a quality and level transcending the limitations of time. And this is natural, hidden fear referred to above. We talked extensively about this concept of hidden love. Can we get a one-liner on that and move on? What's the hidden love?
Take a book.
Okay, that's a quick, maybe like a
Said
little
one-liner.
a little more expansion.
If anything makes you not, if anything says you have to do this, but you know doing that would be bowing down to something other than
It would separate you
the
from
Lord,
God in some way.
then you would not do it.
There's something
you would
inside us
have
that's
to
going to
die.
stop us from jumping off that cliff, right? That's the hidden love. It's an inheritance from the patriarchs. In that hidden love is contained hidden fear. And the basic way to say this is like a child and a father are connected. I want to be near him, and I don't want to be separated from him. Basic hidden love and fear. We can tap into that when we realize every sin separates us from God. In an infinite distance, it creates this iron curtain that puts between us and him that we can't even see him or smell him at all. However, once you do teshuvah, we can remove those curtains, right? Once you do some of this meditation, you can break through some of these barriers. So, the hidden natural fear referred to above, which is contained in the hidden love. However, in order that it should be translated into action, in the sense, the fear of sin, namely to shuv me'ra v'aseh tov, to turn away from evil in deed and word and thought, one needs to bring it to light from the hidden depths of the understanding of his heart, where it transcends time, and to a place within the realm of actual thought, which is in the brain. So there's like a subconscious and a conscious. We want to bring this into the consciousness. And by the way, in case you think this is easy, we're 3 levels deep of difficult now, if you've been counting. So first, I naturally don't fear God. I mean, I naturally inside somewhere maybe, but I fear whatever it is that I fear, right? Overdraft fees. Terrified. So,
Or
you know what I mean?
police on the side of the road.
Whatever it is for you.
Automatically take your foot off the gas, even if you're not speeding.
Everybody's got their flavor.
Right.
So, I'm supposed to take that, and I'm supposed to fear God, who's so abstract and I can't see it all. That's one level, very difficult. I'm supposed to awaken this from not just an intellectual thing, but an actual emotional response. We said this requires meditation, lots of it, to break through all the physical stuff that's blocking that. Very difficult, right? Very difficult, that in its own. Now you're going to take that fear of God that you've just developed and grown, I guess you could say, like a flame, like you're kindling the flame, and now it's got something you could work with here. And you're supposed to translate that into a fear of sin, which now is, again, not God anymore, but it's something else. This is 3 layers deep of very difficult. Mm-hmm. And now you're going to translate that fear, I know who he is and I should toe the line, to the sandwich that I'm eating, right? And I'm going to pick this one and not that one because of whatever reason. Or the pick your mitzvah, right? Pick your sin. I'm waking up in the morning and I don't want to have to put on the tefillin, I just want to sleep again. Just let me go another hour, another 4 hours, another 6 hours. Anyways, I'm a bit of a house cat.
It's noon.
Uh-oh, right? So that's taking it from that to the place where I'm afraid of God, to the place where I can actually feel it, not just think about it, and now taking it to the place where get your tuchus out of bed, right, and go do the stuff God told you to do because of the fear of sin, right? Because I would rather do the stuff that he wants. And again, we're talking about spiritual acrobatics here. You're going to have to take your soul through this process, and it's not easy. So I like the way that that Jonathan Kahn put it. He had said, if you don't know that you're in the ring, you're never going to win the fight. Mm-hmm. You need to recognize this is going to be tough. Again, the verse the Rabbi told us to memorize. If you think like, I tried and I couldn't do it, don't believe him, right? You could probably try harder and you'll probably get it done. So, meditate about God's greatness.
There's little things I think that I love the Tanya. Little things that I've learned that you would never think of. Like, it says that, we pray in the Schneur. If you pray and then you are busy and you're caught up and life's kind of crazy and you don't do it, it says God is looking for you and actually asks around, hey, have you seen Laura?
You seen my
Where's
good buddy?
Laura? And you're
supposed to be here.
And then you hear that and you're like, oh,
right?
But that helps you realize from his perspective. I think that's the whole thing of the Tanya. Makes it look at it from God's point of view, which helps you do all the things that he wants you to do. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't see the other person's point of view, You only see
You're
your
just
own.
doing animal
he
stuff
doesn't
again.
care. He's not paying attention. I got all this stuff to do. But if you see the other person's point of view, especially God's, then you can't help but love. You can't help but reason. You can't help but go, oh, I
course.
didn't know.
And then you'll start doing all that rationalization stuff, but for somebody else, which is
Yes.
now a mitzvah. Right.
It's really beautiful how it turns it around.
So, you need to somehow translate this awakened fear of God in your heart to a fear of sin. And then to turn away from evil in deed and word and thought and bring it to light. Dropping down to the brackets here. This means immersing his thought in it for a lengthy period of time until its activity shall emerge from a potential state into an actual state. Namely, turning away from evil and actually doing good in your thoughts and in your speech and in your actions, because God, who looks at and sees and listens and perceives all the deeds and searches the reins of his heart, as the rabbis of blessed memory had said, reflect upon these three things. There's an eye that sees, and an ear that hears, and I believe it's like a pen that records or something. There's a video being taken of all of us all the time, watching our actions and recording it for posterity. And although he has no bodily likeness, God doesn't have a body, right? On the contrary, everything is revealed and known to him infinitely more than, for example, through the medium of physical sight and hearing. It is by way of illustration like a man who knows and feels himself, within himself, all that is happening and being experienced by each of his 248 organs, right? If we stop and think about it for a second, we can feel the way our feet feel on the ground right here. And we could feel the way the table feels on your arms and the back of the chair and all this other stuff as well, right? You know what's happening with you at all times. This is how God knows us. Such as cold and heat, the feeling of heat even in your toenails, right? You could feel toenails even if you put heat on the toenail. For example, when he is scorched by fire, so also their essence and substance and all that is done to them, he knows and senses in his brain. Corresponding to this knowledge, by way of example, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be he, knows and all that befalls all created beings, both higher and lower. We're all like hairs that are growing off God's arm. Allegory, right? God doesn't have hairs. Because they all receive their flow of life from him, Yisbarach, right? The hairs grow on the arm because of the flow of life that's going on in the bloodstream of the body. Yisbarach, blessed be he, for all is from you, says the verse in 1 Chronicles. And this is the meaning of what we say, and no creature is hidden from you. And this is in our daily liturgy, or in the liturgy for Rosh Hashanah, rather. As Rambam Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon said, and this has been accepted by the scholars of the Kabbalah, as Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the predecessor to the Arizal, writes in Pardes, that knowing himself, as it were, he knows all created things that exist by virtue of his true existence. Like we said before, God is the knower, the knowledge, and the known. God knows everything that's going on with us and all of our thoughts and all of our feelings and all of our actions because he knows himself. Which, again, if you're trying to figure that out, you're not going to get very far. But the idea is that we're all connected to God. We all grow out of God. And by knowing himself and what's going on, he knows all that's going on with us and all that's going throughout history. Nevertheless, how bad are we doing here? Pretty bad, huh? All right, let's pick it up. Nevertheless, this parallel is only an appeal to the ear. In truth, however, the analogy bears no similarity whatsoever to the object of the comparison. For the human soul, even the rational and the divine, is affected by the events of body and its pain. And its pain by reason of its being actually clothed in the vivifying soul, which is in the body itself. And that's how it works in us. In HaKadosh Baruch Hu, however, this is not the case. Chas v'sholem, God forbid if that were the case. That would mess up the entire structure of the universe. God is not affected by the events of the world and its changes, nor by the world itself, for they do not affect any change in him. Again, Chas v'sholem, God forbid. As it says in the Isaiah, I am God, I didn't change, right? I was God before the world was here. I made the world. I'm God after the world is here. It affected no change in me whatsoever. The fact that I care if you do a mitzvah or not is a choice that I made. It's not a cause and effect situation. In order to help us to perceive this well with our intelligence, the scholars of truth have already treated it at length in their books. But all Jews are believers, sons of believers. Like we talked about in when Moshe Rabbeinu yelled at them about the spies, right? They weren't ready. We can't go into Israel. We're like grasshoppers in their eyes. We're never going to make it. And Moshe, he just yells at them a little bit. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm sorry, we're ready to go. Well, what happened? You just said God couldn't do it like a short time ago. What changed? The animal side, the fear, it had no substance. The darkness of this world has no substance. If you have a room and it's filled with bricks, you need to call people in and remove the bricks from the room. If it's filled with dirt, you got to sweep the dirt out of the room. If it's filled with chairs, you got to move the chairs out of the room. If it's filled with bowling balls, you got to throw the bowling balls out of your room, right? Or maybe roll. If it's filled with darkness, what do? You got to take buckets and get the darkness out of your room? Turn on a light. It has no substance of its own. So what happens when you put a little light on that darkness? It vanishes. So what was left? Well, they're believers, sons of believers, right? Without human intellectual speculation whatsoever, and they declare, you were the same before the world was created, and so forth, as has been explained above in chapter 20. Now, therefore, each individual Jew, or anyone connected to the olive tree here, whoever he may be, when he ponders upon this for some considerable time each day. Remember, we got to meditate about God each day. That's like one of the primary messages of this chapter. How HaKadosh Baruch Hu is truly omnipresent in the higher and lower worlds, and in reality he fills the heavens and the earth, as it's written in the verse, do I not fill the heavens and the earth? And that the whole earth is full of his glory, as it's written in the verse, and the whole earth is full of his glory, that he looks and regards and searches his reins in his heart, and all his actions his word. He looks in his kishkas and counts his every step. Then fear will be implanted in his heart throughout the day. And even when he again meditates on this, even with a superficial reflection, this is what I was talking about earlier, when you, okay, maybe it took some time to get there, but once you got there, it made an imprint on you, and all you need to do is just kind of go back to that mind frame, and then you can snap back into it. Does that make sense? That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. You acquired a real, true fear of God, you feel it emotionally in your heart, and then you just remember the time you felt that way, right? Because the feeling, it made an imprint on your brain as well. So you remember the feeling, and you're like, oh, right, and it all comes flooding back to you very quickly. Again, when he meditates on this, even if it's a superficial reflection, at any time or moment, he will turn away from evil and do good in his thought, in his speech, and his deeds, so as not to rebel against God, not to rebel, chas v'sholem, in the sight of his glory, whereof the whole world is full. And this is in accordance with the instructions of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to his disciples, as was quoted above. Do you remember the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, or should we repeat it? Repeat it? No, that's fine. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was one of the last leaders of Jerusalem before it fell to the Romans. And he had two disciples, and he was on his deathbed, and they come to him and they say, Rabbi, give us a blessing before you die. Oh, yeah. And he said, may your fear of God be like the fear of man. And they said, Rabbi, from you we need a blessing like this? Give us a blessing. I mean, this is your last chance. Give us something good. We need to be afraid of God like a man. And he says the famous words, halavai, could it only be that you would fear God like a man? Because what happens when you fear man? You're driving past a police officer and you take your foot off the pedal, even if you're going the speed limit or even under it, because you know someone's watching. So if you know that God's watching all the time, you'll never sin. You'll be A-okay. That's the blessing of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Famous story. This then is what the verse means, only to fear the Lord your God and to walk on all his ways. This is, again, Deuteronomy, what was it, 10:12? That we started our verse with. What is it that God wants from you already? Just fear him. Rach yira. For this is the fear that leads to the fulfillment of his mitzvot yizbarach, through turning away from evil and doing good. Those are the 365 negative commandments, the thou shalt nots, and the 248 positive mitzvot, thou shalt. Or as it says in the Torah of Homer Simpson, the dough and the dough nuts. I didn't say the dough right, did I? That's okay. Moving on. So we want to turn away from evil and do good. This is the lower fear, which has been discussed earlier. It applies to Moshe, that is to say, in relation to the quality of da'at that is in each divine Jewish soul, anyone connected to the olive tree. This is a minor thing, as was stated above. So the Talmud was right when they said it's a very tiny thing, because it exists within you already. You just need to wake it up. For da'at is the faculty which binds the hidden understanding of the heart with that which is actually revealed. That's why we say it's the root of our emotions. Right? As it's revealed in thought, as is known to the students of Kabbalah. So, da'at functions to take something that's intellectual and make it emotional. So, I can coldly understand something, and I can have an opinion about it, and that's not cold at all anymore. Either I like it or I don't. Right? The example I believe Rabbi Gordon, of blessed memory, gave, he had said that two people, they go and they take a stop smoking course, smoke enders course, right? And they both get A+. They got the same grades. They both did very well in the course. They come out. One person never smokes again a day in his life, and the other one, he goes and he buys a carton. What's different between those two people? One of it turned all that intellectual stuff into an emotion and acted on it. The other one left it up here as intellect. How many people go to...
You know, and isn't that the biggest gift that there really, really is? I just, quickie.
Yeah, no, go
I
ahead.
have a friend who I adore, who, and no exaggeration, we were just talking about learning and Tanya about, you know, what you study here and you study there.
Sure, yeah.
And the gifts that God gives us in this lifetime, if He gives us stuff like this, that means it's for us. He is giving it to you and He's saying, hey, listen, I want you to know this, I want you to do it.
Otherwise, it wouldn't have come up.
Right. It just wouldn't have come across your doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
And they did something completely opposite, and nothing horrible, and the hindsight was, I know that, but I did this.
Because there's no dot.
There's no da'at.
That's the answer.
Isn't that incredible? I think it's a
Simple
gift
as
to
that.
get the da'at, though, don't you?
Well, yeah, but it's
I don't
something
think
that we
you can
can
get it
work on
yourself,
ourselves. I think it's
I think everything is a gift, but you know
well,
what I'm saying?
everything's a gift, but I mean, it's attainable. This is something we could do.
But you have to work at it like this
How do
process
you?
says.
That's what I was just going to ask. How do you get there?
Back here
First, I
is
need to break up the body,
you gotta break up
and then
the
I need
flesh,
to focus more.
And then after you break up the flesh, which is the part that everybody hates, it's like, well, why is this happening? It has to happen to break you so that
To
you
get you to
can.
turn.
Yes.
What happens when the ox doesn't want to plow? It gets the zets, right?
Let's go.
Then you're out on the field and you're bringing food to millions, right?
Right. Isn't that amazing? And everybody hates that process, but we're here for the process.
That's why we're here. This is
Yeshua
the
gets broken. Why?
Mhm.
For everything.
this world is the vestibule to the world to come,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're just walking. This is the foyer or foyer.
The foyer.
So let's just review that really quick because I think it's important. What's our two-step process? First, crush the body with penitential reflections.
Body.
2, exert the soul to reflect on God's greatness. First,
Both of
limit the
which-
pleasure seeking, then spend time meditating about God. In the case of your friend, whoever or whatever the situation was, if that person were to take extra time and think about the subject matter and just meditate on that for a while, they could develop a da'at about that subject matter to be able to help them facilitate the right choice next time, right? It's something that's possible for us. It's within the realm of what's been given to us.
Exactly, Tim. It's perfect. It's so scary, but it's just got to be done.
It's true.
That's exactly right.
So, let's see here. In addition to this, one should remember that, as in the case of a mortal king, the essence and fear of him relates to his inner nature and vitality, not to his body, right? For when he is asleep, there is no fear of him, and surely his inner character and vitality are not perceived by physical eyes, but only by the vision of the mind, through the physical eyes beholding his stature and his robes, making the beholder aware of the vitality that's clothed in them. If this be so, he must likewise truly fear God when he gazes with his physical eyes at the heavens and the earth, which is such an important point. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, you're supposed to fear God like a king. You don't fear the king because he's big, right? You don't fear the king because he's the governor, right? And you're afraid that he's going to beat you up. I believe it was Rabbi Gordon who said the king could be 4 feet tall and roly-poly, right? You don't have to fear the king because of the way he looks, but you fear the king because of who he is. It's the personal qualities. Top of 226 on the left.
Mm-hmm.
So you're afraid of God because of who he is, not what he looks like. And when do you fear the king? When he's standing at the on the throne, right? So the Alter Rebbe is taking this, and this is an important understanding. If you can get this, you'll have a better knowledge of God, for sure. If you're afraid of a king, you're not afraid of a king when he sleeps, but you are afraid of a king when he's standing in his robes, right? In the throne room. How much more so? If this be so, you must likewise truly fear God when you gaze with your physical eyes at the heavens and the earth and all their hosts, wherein the light of the Ein Sof Yisbarach animates them. So you look around, and what do you see? Nature, atoms, molecules, the moon, the stars, the heavens, the earth, all of this stuff holding me up with magnetic forces so I don't plummet into the depths of the center of the earth. That was a cool movie too. And
You and Rabbi
you look
Gordon
at all
both
this.
are in Reformed.
Oh, thanks. So when you're looking at all of creation and all of the laws of physics and everything, you should be in awe of the king, because these are the robes of God, right? As opposed to the robes of a king of flesh and blood. The Alter Rebbe is going to pause with a note, and he's going to say, and it is also seen with the glance of the eye that they are nullified to his light, Yisbarach, by the fact that they prostrate themselves, and again, this is a note, every day towards the west at the time of their setting. Where does the sun set?
In the West.
What's in the west?
Israel.
So we have the temple, right? Where's the door to the temple? Where's the Holy of Holies? The door to the temple is on the east.
Is on his
The Holy of
east.
Holies is on the west. So every night the sun comes and bows down to the Holy of Holies where God's presence is, right? Says the Alter Rebbe. So even the earth itself and then the nature itself is bowing towards God every day at the time of their setting. As the rabbis of blessed memory commented on the verse, and the hosts of the heavens bow before you. What, you thought that was parable or poetry? It's true. That the Shekhinah abides in the west. God's divine presence abides in the west. So that their daily orbit westward is kind of a prostration and self-nullification. Even he who has never seen the king and does not recognize him at all, nevertheless, when he enters the royal court and sees many honorable princes prostrating themselves before this one man, there falls upon him fear and awe, right? Let's say, back in the days before everyone had their personal screen, and you didn't know what the president looked like. That was actually a big changeover, I believe it was in the Nixon days, these debates were televised now, and that made a whole difference in who we chose. Because before you looked at the king or the president's answers, and now you're looking at how he looks, right? He looks stately, I'll pick him, right? So you walk into a throne room, you could have no idea who the king is, but you see everybody else bowing to this one guy, all of a sudden you're afraid of that one guy. What happened, right? It's a realization. And although many garments are involved in this investment, how many garments does God have before he gets down to the place where I could do that?
Separate 10.
Garments.
Garments.
Oh, garments.
Innumerable, multiple.
Innumerable. His garments are tzimtzumim, right? Sorry, is that a message or something?
No.
Gotcha. His garments are innumerable, right? How many are God's garments? Many and powerful. He conceals himself by many and powerful garments. So that by the time it gets down to here, it doesn't look like God, it looks like a table and an empty cup. Right? Okay, thank you. So we know that the king is clothed in many garments, are involved in this investment. There is no difference or distinction at all in the fear of a mortal king, whether he be naked or robed in one or many garments. It's the same thing, right? If the king's up there and he's wearing 7 robes, he's still the king and you're still afraid of him, right? So also, we look at the earth, we should be afraid of God, who's clothed in these many garments. The essential thing, however, is the mental training. Again, meditate on God's greatness. Set aside time every day to meditate on God's greatness. To habituate one's mind and thought continuously, that it never remain fixed in his heart and in his mind, that everything one sees with one's eyes, the heavens and the earth and all therein, constitutes the outer garments of HaMelech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the key. You want to know God face to face? You want to get there? It starts with this. Everything you see, I don't want to say that like that. Everything you see, you should think of God. This is the outer garment of God. Everything that happens to you, blame God, right? Maybe blame's a bad word there. Credit God, right? It didn't happen because somebody else chose it. It didn't happen because of happenstance, right? Coincidence is just an 11-letter name for God anyways. It happened specifically because God's right there making you experience this.
The right verbiage is Gamzu Latova.
Gamzu Latova. So when these things happen to us, what should we be thinking? Oh, or ouch, or yay? Or should we be thinking, what's the message? It's a different understanding. When you have that knowledge of God and you realize that everything that happens to you specifically because he did it, right? Like the Talmud says, there's not a leaf that blows over in the wind without God's express command to do so. There's not a blade of grass that God doesn't send an angel to strike it and tell it to grow. Gives it a zetz and the grass goes.
Not only that he did it, but he did it for my ultimate good. Whether I could see it or understand it.
And, by the way, he's benevolent, too. That comes from the meditation part. Mm-hmm. That's a different life. That's a different life. You have the knowledge that God is everything, and everything that's coming to you is coming from him. then every